Alright, here was Comet NeoWISE last night, the 17th of July at just after 11 p.m. It just so happens that this one object is just in the right place for the way my deck is pointing. Everything else in astronomy usually goes to the south, you know, the planets operate to the south. So I just want to show you, this was through the DSLR, and I'll show you what my settings were on DSLR for this, if I just thumb down here. So it was actually f6.3. I did, you know, really a snapshot. I did not set up in any particular way. I just put the camera in a tripod. As soon as I saw the comet, it's so obvious in a dark sky. It's not, once the sky is dark, it's quite easy to find. When the sky is not dark, it's really hard to find. So that's one thing. Wait till that horizon is darker. You're just not going to find it. Let's bring it back on again. And the main thing I realized was if I actually increase the exposure time, see there it's 8 seconds, and I've got the ISO cranked up to 1600. Actually, that's not that high for this. I usually go for a high ISO, right? I realized when I started increasing the time, the exposure time, I think I did one at 20 seconds. Then, of course, everything was moving, because at 20 seconds the stars start to move and it kind of damaged the image. So then I took it right back down to 5 or 6 seconds and actually cranked up the ISO. And my camera will go over here and get into the ISO, and actually cranked it up to high, which is I think 6400. Yeah, so 3200 is there, and then this is like a fractionally higher than that one there, 6400. So I did the final shot of that, and then let me show you the shots that I took here. So let's get back out here. So I think this is one of the first ones, and I used a 135 zoom, so you'll see in the camera here. So it's a Nikon D5000. I've got a Sigma zoom. It's 70 to 300, and I had it set on 135, which I just remembered as being a nice intermediate zoom position. And with that position, you're not too close up to the comet, so you're losing out of the frame, and it's also not so close up that you're actually starting to make the background move. So that was one of the first shots. Then I did a few experiments. I zoomed in a little bit. You can see that the stars are starting to not be fantastic. Actually, that one is okay actually so far. And I was thinking if I zoomed in, I might see more tail. Then I lost the tail because I went to like 200 mil, and then I fished around a little bit. Took a couple more shots. I was trying to just get position the nucleus low so I could see the full extent of the tail, and eventually I realised the wider shot was much nicer. I was trying to see there'll be an ion tail as well. I think that's the one on the left. It's very faint, but there's an ion tail going more or less straight up, and the gas tail is going to the right. One of the shots, that one there, see the ion tail now is there, electrically charged particles, whereas the gas tail is going this way. So that's why I was kind of looking to get a maximum tail shot, but then losing the reference to the foreground. Actually, I think the foreground makes it nicer. You see the stars? The stars are still not bad there. So let's see what my settings were for that one. So we had there 10 seconds, 170 mil, so that's actually still reasonable, and I had the ISO at 1600. That actually seemed like a good setting. This is off my deck. There was trees nearby, and it just happened to be, I just spotted it between the trees, and they gave it a nice frame. You can see the ion tail again going up the left side and the gas tail to the right. And that's the, it wasn't completely dark, so as soon as you start to do longer exposure, then anything foreground starts to light up a little bit, but actually it's okay, kind of frames it. That's the view by eye, really. That's actually zoomed a little bit, but when I'm looking up in the trees, I'm seeing the trees and the comet, and it was really obvious once the sky was dark. Before it was dark, not so obvious. So that's what I had. So I just had the Nikon D5000, and the important things to do are to set the camera, the lens, on manual focus, because the camera's not going to focus in the dark. Then to focus this lens, you do this, the end bit is the actual focus here, right? And what you do is just turn the camera to any bright light on the horizon. For me, there's a bay across the way there with street lighting, and there's some bright house lights. So just focus on a bright house light. It's got to be quite far away though, nothing closer that won't be in focus for the horizon, right? If you can see a bright star, you can use that, and that's the best focus. So I just focused on the some lights across the bay. They're probably more than 3 kilometers away, so that worked for me. So yeah, it's the lens at manual focus. And then when you zoom, just be careful you haven't lost focus. A lot of the zooms are not parfocal, meaning when you change focal length, they don't stay in focus. So I checked it a couple of times, and then on this camera I just put it to M, which means manual exposure, and then I can set the exposure using the screen on the back, right? So that's my exposure screen there. So I can just rotate the dial here to get the different settings. We can get both there. There's 5 seconds, 4, and actually with a shot like this I start out with about 10 seconds just to see what I get. So I think my first shot was been 10 seconds. I went up to 20 seconds, realised the stars were trailing, so then I went back down to a lower shot. The least exposure that you can give it will get you the best shot. It will be the least grainy, the clearest and everything like that. But of course, with an object in the night sky, you want it to be bright. So don't be afraid to crank up the ISO, and don't be afraid to crank up the exposure time to first of all see what it looks like that, and then if you see it's flawed, then bring it back down, right? One trick is definitely crank up the ISO and bring down the exposure time. That will give you a brighter comet, but that won't have time for the stars to have moved. So that's one trick. Anyway, now I'll show you what the pictures look like off the camera, right? So there you go.